Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to run a little simulation in your mind.
Oh, a simulation. I like where this is going.
Yeah. So I want you to imagine you have a superpower, but honestly, it's not the fun kind.
Right.
It's not flight. It's not invisibility, and it's definitely not super strength.
No, this is more of a, I guess you'd call it a psychological superpower, or maybe a spiritual one.
Exactly. So imagine you have an internal alarm system,
Mm.
but it's not, a smoke detector that only beeps when the house is actually on fire. It's
It's way more sensitive than that.
right. It's a seismic sensor.
Right.
It's so finely calibrated that it doesn't just go off when you do something wrong. It goes off when you do something that might be wrong.
Yeah, it detects the tremors before the earthquake even hits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It screams at you when you're about to step into a gray area.
Yeah.
Like when you're about to do something that is technically legal, technically allowed, but it feels fuzzy.
And that fuzzy zone, that gray area,
Yeah.
is where the real battle for character happens. I mean, that's where the truly fascinating stuff is.
And so today, we're diving into a concept that is entirely dedicated to navigating those exact gray areas. We are talking about the concept of wara.
Wara, yeah. It's a term that comes up constantly in Islamic ethics and spirituality.
Right?
And it's often translated as scrupulousness or piety. But honestly, those English words feel a bit, I don't know, dusty.
Yeah, they sound like something you'd read in a Victorian novel.
Exactly. They don't really capture the electric intensity of what this concept actually is in practice, because it's basically a high-performance lifestyle for the soul.
And to understand this high-performance lifestyle, we've waded through a massive stack of sources today.
Huge stack.
We're talking classical ethical manuals. We have definitions from absolute heavyweights like Al-Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah, heaps of poetry, and some historical anecdotes that, I'm going to be honest, seem almost impossible to believe in the modern world.
They really do. They sound like fiction. But the mission today is to unpack the psychology behind these stories.
Right.
We want to understand what we're calling spiritual caution. Like, how does a human being navigate a world full of doubt without just losing their mind?
Because there is a fine line between having high moral standards and just having straight-up OCD.
Oh, absolutely. And there is a line, and we are definitely going to get to that danger zone later, but I think we have to start with the definition.
Yeah, let's ground this. We keep saying this word wara. What are we actually talking about here?
So if you open the lexicon and just look at the linguistic roots, wara literally means restraint. The Arabic root, taharuj, it implies a sense of holding back or a sense of withdrawal. It's the physical act of stopping yourself.
Like hitting the brakes.
Exactly like hitting the brakes. But in the technical context of Islamic law and spirituality, it gets a lot more specific. The scholars define it as avoiding suspicious things, what they call shubuhat, for fear of falling into prohibited things.
Shubuhat. That's a key term here.
It is. Shubuhat means doubtful matters. Things that aren't clear-cut. It's not black and white. It's the gray. So wara is the discipline of avoiding the gray to ensure you never, ever touch the black.
Now, when I first read through our prep notes for this deep dive, I had a question that I think a lot of listeners might have too. How is this different from Zuhd?
Ah.
Because we've covered Zuhd asceticism before on the show. Isn't this just the exact same thing, like renouncing the world?
That is by far the most common confusion. They are definitely cousins. They hang out in the same circles, but they are not twins. And the scholar Ibn al-Qayyim gives this brilliant, laser-focused breakdown of the difference between the two.
I love a good breakdown. Walk me through it.
He says Zuhd, the asceticism piece, is leaving something because it brings no benefit in the hereafter, so it's an evaluation of value.
Okay.
You look at a solid gold watch and say, this is expensive, it's nice, but it doesn't help my soul, so I don't need it. It's about minimalism, decluttering your spiritual life.
So Zuhd is saying, this is useless to my goals. It's an efficiency calculation.
Right. But war is completely different. War is leaving something out of fear that it might harm you in the hereafter.
Ah, that is a very distinct shift in mindset.
It really is. Because Zuhd is about utility, but war is about safety. Wara is a safety protocol.
A safety protocol.
Yeah, it's leaving the harmless, something that is technically allowed strictly to protect yourself from the harmful.
Wow.
It's risk management for the afterlife.
Risk management for the afterlife. That's a really helpful way to frame it.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly to the most famous analogy in the source material, The protective fence. We have to talk about the shepherd.
We do. This is the classic illustration from a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's a visual that would have resonated deeply with a desert society, obviously, but it holds up perfectly today.
Right.
He describes the lawful, the halal, as completely clear, like bright sunlight, and the unlawful, the haram, as clear too, pitch black.
So most things are obvious. Murder is bad. Giving to charity is good.
Right. But between them, he says, are these doubtful matters, the shubwat. And he compares the person who plays around with these doubtful matters to a shepherd who grazes his flock right next to a dedicated sanctuary, a hema.
And just for context, a hema was like a king's private land.
Right, exactly. Back then, a king would mark off this lush pasture for his own use. It was a strict no trespassing zone. And if you were caught grazing your animals there, the punishment was severe.
Okay.
Now, imagine you're a shepherd. You want your sheep to eat well. And the grass right next to the king's fence is incredibly green and lush.
And sheep aren't exactly known for respecting property lines.
Yeah.
Or understanding GPS coordinates.
Precisely. They see grass, they eat grass. So if you graze your flock right on the border, what is the statistical probability that a sheep wanders across that invisible line?
I mean, it's basically 100%. It's going to happen.
It's inevitable. And the application here is terrifyingly simple. If you live your life playing right on the line of what is technically allowed.
Constantly pushing the boundary.
Yeah, seeing how close you can get to the sin without technically sinning. If you do that, you will eventually cross it. You will fall into the forbidden.
So practicing war is the active decision to move the flock.
Yes. War is saying, I'm not going to graze near the fence. I'm going to stay 50 feet back. It's the realization that the only way to be absolutely 100% sure you aren't stealing the king's grass is to not even be near the king's grass.
It creates a buffer zone.
A safety buffer. And this brings up a huge practical question about how people actually apply this. Because when I hear, stay 50 feet back, my first thought is, wow, that sounds exhausting.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these historical sources, and some of it seems doable, but some of it seems like you'd basically have to leave society and go live in a cave.
Right. Is it an all or nothing thing? Do you have to be a literal monk to practice this?
Yeah. What's the expectation?
And that's where the nuance really comes in. The scholars, particularly Al-Ghazali, realize that human beings have vastly different capacities. You can't just hold everyone to the absolute highest standard immediately. It would break them. So they broke Wara's down into levels. It's a spectrum.
Okay, let's walk through these levels. I think this helps make it a lot more practical for you listening. So what is level 1?
Level 1 is the baseline. Al-Ghazali calls this the Wara of the just, or the adul. This is the absolute minimum requirement to be considered a decent, upstanding member of the community.
So this is basically the don't get arrested level.
Pretty much. This is simply avoiding things that are clearly, undeniably forbidden by fatwa. By the law, don't steal, don't drink alcohol, don't eat pork, don't commit fraud.
Just the obvious black and white stuff.
Right. If you fail at level 1, you aren't just lacking piety. You are considered corrupt. You are actively in sin. In a traditional Islamic system, your testimony in court wouldn't even be accepted. This is the floor.
Got it. Level 1 is following the law. So what is level 2?
Level 2 is where we step up. This is the wara of the righteous, or the salihun. This is where you start avoiding things where there is a probability of prohibition, even if it's not proven.
Okay, give me a modern example of this to ground it.
Let's say you're buying a used laptop, and the price is really good, like suspiciously good. The guy selling it is a bit sketchy. He doesn't have the original receipt, the charger is missing, and he wants cash only in a parking lot.
Yeah, I know this guy.
We all know this guy. Now, if you went to a judge with this, the judge might say, look, technically you paid for it, he gave it to you. On the surface, this transaction is valid. We can't actually prove the laptop is stolen.
So it is technically legal.
It passes level 1. But at level 2, your internal alarm goes off. You think there is a very high probability these are stolen goods. So the salihun, the righteous person, walks away, not because the law forces them to, but because their conscience cannot handle the probability of aiding a thief.
That's a great distinction. So level 1 is it legal? And level 2 is it ethical?
That is a perfect way to frame it. And then you have level 3, the wara of the pious, the mutakwan. This is where the air starts getting pretty thin.
Okay.
This is leaving something that is purely 100% permissible halal simply because it might lead to something prohibited.
Wait, so the thing is...
Talking about people just casually chatting about a friend. Oh, hey, did you hear Bob got a new job? That is halal. It's permitted. But if you talk about Bob for 20 minutes straight, what usually happens?
It eventually turns into, yeah, but did you hear how he got it?
Exactly. It almost always slides into gossip. It slides into backbiting. So the mudokon, the pious, might choose to severely limit their casual talk about other people, not because talking is a sin, but because they know their own human weakness. They know that casual talk is the on-ramp to the highway of gossip.
That requires an incredible amount of self-awareness. That is the fence analogy in action. You're staying 50 feet away from the conversation just to avoid the sin.
Yes. You don't even step onto the grass. And then there's level 4.
Level 4, the boss battle.
The boss battle. The war of the truthful, the Siddiquen. This is the highest possible level of spiritual discipline. This is avoiding absolutely anything, even something as basic as eating, sleeping, or going for a walk, if it isn't done strictly for God.
Okay, that sounds really abstract. What does that actually look like for a human being?
It means radical intentionality in every single breath. A person at level 4 doesn't just eat a sandwich because they feel hungry. They eat to gain strength, to help people, or to worship. If they can't frame the action as an act of worship or service, they just don't do it.
So they don't just ask, is this allowed? They ask, is this for God?
Exactly. It's living with a laser beam of intention. There's no such thing as idle time for them. Everything is purpose-driven.
That is intense focus. It actually reminds me of elite athletes who track every calorie, every minute of REM sleep, solely for the purpose of the game.
That's a fantastic comparison. It is spiritual athleticism. And to operate at these higher levels, especially levels 2 and 3, you need a very specific psychological tool. The sources talk about the psychology of doubt.
Right, the heart test.
Yes. There's this incredibly famous hadith where the prophet says, consult your heart.
Consult your heart. It's such a poetic phrase.
It is beautiful, but he contextualizes it. He says, consult your heart, even if the people give you a fatwa and give you a fatwa again.
Wait, break that down. Even if a qualified scholar tells me it's okay.
That's the radical part of this teaching. He's saying that legal rulings of fatwas are based on external evidence. A scholar or a judge can only judge based on what you tell them. You ask, is this contract valid? And they look at the paper and say, yes, the paperwork is correct. But your heart knows the backstory.
Their heart knows you're secretly gaming the system.
Right. If your heart feels what they call haka in Arabic, if it wavers or flutters with guilt, that is data. That hesitation is a direct signal from your superconscious. The famous quote is, leave what makes you doubt for what does not make you doubt.
Leave what makes you doubt for what does not make you doubt. I feel like we should just tattoo that on our foreheads.
It's the golden rule of Wara. If it feels sticky, if it feels heavy in your chest, drop it. Move to the solid ground of absolute certainty.
Okay, I am with you. I see the beauty in this, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because consult your heart sounds great in theory, but some of us have hearts that worry about literally everything.
An neurotic heart.
Exactly. If I consulted my heart about whether I locked the front door, I would never leave the driveway. Can people take this concept too far?
You hit the nail right on the head. And the classical scholars, especially Ibn Taymiyyah, were very, very aware of this exact problem. There is a definite danger zone.
Let's talk about the danger zone. When does wara go wrong?
Ibn Taymiyyah talks extensively about corrupt wara. This is when the internal alarm mechanism malfunctions. And it usually happens in 2 specific ways. The first is waswas, or obsessive compulsion.
I've heard this term. This is basically religious OCD.
Yes. This is where people obsess over things like water purity or tiny specks of dirt or constantly repeating their prayers because they are convinced they didn't pronounce a syllable exactly right. Ibn Taymiyyah explicitly calls this weakness of mind.
That's a bit harsh.
It's harsh, but it's honest. He's saying, look, religion is supposed to be livable. If you are washing your hands 50 times because you think you might have touched an invisible speck of impurity, that is not piety. That's a mental block. It paralyzes you. Real wara empowers you to act correctly. It doesn't freeze you in a state of fear.
Okay, so that's the first malfunction. Paralysis. What is the second one?
Misplaced priorities. And this one is fascinating and honestly a bit scary. It's when you are hyper-scrupulous about tiny microscopic details, but you are completely blind to major sins.
Straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel.
Exactly. The perfect analogy. Ibn Taymiyyah gives this historical example of the Kharijites.
The Kharijites. These were the extremists of the early Islamic period, right?
Yes. They were a sect known for being incredibly strict, fanatical, really. They would declare other mainstream Muslims to be apostates, and they would kill them. We are talking about mass murder,
Yeah.
destabilizing entire societies.
Heavy, dark stuff.
Very dark. But there is a recorded story where one of these Kharijites was walking through an orchard with his group. He saw a date fall from a palm tree, just one single date lying in the dirt. He picked it up and popped it in his mouth.
Okay.
And another Kharijite in the group immediately started yelling at him, "Spit it out! Don't touch that! You haven't paid the owner of the orchard for it. That is theft."
Wait. Pause. These guys were actively murdering people,
Yes.
but they were terrified of eating a single date they found on the ground.
That is corrupt Wara.
Hmm.
They were scrupulous about a penny, but completely careless with human blood. They had totally lost the hierarchy of moral values.
That is terrifying. It really shows you can be religious in a very technical, pedantic sense, but completely monstrous in an actual moral sense.
Precisely. So the scholars emphasize over and over that Wara requires ilm. It requires knowledge. You cannot just act on a mood or a vague feeling of guilt. You need to know the hierarchy of rules. The overarching principle is you cannot neglect a known duty because of a vague suspicion.
Give me a practical, everyday example of that rule.
Okay. Let's say you have a neighbor who falls severely ill. You have a duty, a clear, established religious duty to visit him, check on him, maybe bring him some food. But you have this vague suspicion that his income isn't purely halal. Maybe he works for a bank or a casino or something you personally disagree with.
So the corrupt Wara voice would say, don't go into his house, don't drink his water, stay away.
Right. But true Wara says, helping your sick neighbor is a certain duty. The exact source of the money he bought his water with is a vague suspicion. Certainty always trumps suspicion. You go help him. You do not trample the clear, obvious duty for the sake of a vague, fuzzy doubt.
That is a really helpful distinction. It keeps the whole concept grounded in reality. It stops it from just becoming an excuse to be a self-righteous jerk.
Exactly. True piety should make you a better, kinder neighbor, not a more difficult one.
Okay, so we've got the definition, the levels, and the warning label. Now I want to get into the physical application of this, because as I was reading the source material for today, I realized Wara isn't just about money or business deals. It's a full 360-degree discipline. It covers all the senses.
It's a full-body workout. The classical sources actually break it down organ by organ, which is a really interesting way to categorize morality.
Let's start with the eyes. The sources heavily mention this idea of the second look.
Right. There is a famous maxim, don't follow a look with another look.
Interpret that for us.
The first glance is accidental. You're human. You're walking down the street, a flashy car drives by, a billboard flashes, or someone very attractive walks past. You see it, that split-second registration. That is forgiven. It just happened.
Because you can't navigate the physical world with a blindfold on?
Exactly. But the second look, the one where you actively turn your head to follow them, the one where you stare, that is on you. That is a conscious choice.
And that's where Wara kicks in.
Yes. Wara is building the reflex to immediately divert the gaze. There's a great story about two immense classical scholars, Waqi and Sufyan al-Thawri. They went out together for the Eid celebration. And Eid is a massive public festival. Lots of people, lots of distractions. Everyone is dressed up in their best clothes.
A feast for the eyes.
Total sensory overload. And Sufyan turned to his companion and said, the first thing we will start our day with is lowering our gaze.
In the middle of a festival.
Especially in the middle of a festival. He treated his eyes like a highly sensitive camera lens that he didn't want to expose to the wrong kind of light. He knew that whatever he let in through his eyes would eventually affect his heart later that day.
It's pure input control.
Precisely. Which naturally brings us to the ears.
The ears. There's a famous story here about Ibn Umar, the son of the Caliph Umar.
Yes, this is a classic text. Ibn Umar was walking along a path with his servant, Nafi, and he heard a shepherd playing a flute in the distance. Now, we have to contextualize this for a second. In his specific personal legal view, wind instruments were something to be strictly avoided. He considered it impermissible to listen to.
Okay, so he hears the flute. What does he actually do?
He literally puts his fingers in his ears, and he physically changes his path to walk further away from the sound. And as he's walking, with his fingers plugging his ears, he keeps asking his servant, Nafi, do you still hear it? Do you still hear it?
He needed the all-clear from the servant.
Right. And only when Nafi finally said, no, it stopped, we're out of range, did Ibn Umar take his fingers out. But here is the critical nuance, and this is why I absolutely love this story. Did he force Nafi to plug his ears?
That's the key question. Did he make the servant do it too?
No. The historical text is clear. Nafi was just listening normally. He was hearing the flute the entire time they were walking.
Wait, so Ibn Umar, this great, rigorous scholar, thinks this sound is bad for his soul, but he just lets his servant walk next to him listening to it.
Yes, because this shows a profound, mature distinction between personal discipline and public enforcement. Ibn Umar held himself to the absolute highest standard, level 3 or 4 wara, but he didn't project or impose that rigorous standard onto the person walking right next to him.
That is so classy. It's like he's saying, I need to do this for my own soul, not I'm going to use my power to control you.
Exactly. It completely prevents that toxic self-righteousness we see so often.
Okay, now we get to my absolute favorite detail in this entire deep dive, the sense of smell. I never in a million years thought about scrupulous smelling.
This one is incredible. It really highlights the extreme granularity of their conscience. We have the story of Omar bin Abdulaziz. He is often historically referred to as the fifth rightly guided caliph because he was a man of just absolute legendary integrity.
This is the guy who reformed the massive public treasury, right?
Yes, the Beit al-Mal. So one day, the treasury received a huge shipment of musk.
Musk. Like very, very expensive perfume.
Incredibly expensive. It was basically liquid gold in that economy. It needed to be officially weighed, divided up, and distributed to the people.
Okay.
While the musk was being weighed and divided in the room, Omar bin Abdul Aziz sat there physically holding his nose shut.
He held his nose like a kid being forced to eat broccoli.
Yes, pinched it shut.
Why? Did raw musk smell bad?
No, it smells amazing. That was exactly the problem. He said, the benefit of musk is its smell.
Oh, wow.
Do you see the underlying logic there? He reasoned that if he sat there breathing it in, enjoying the fragrance while he was dividing it, he would be consuming a public good for his own personal pleasure without having paid for it.
He considered the scent molecules entering his nasal cavity to be theft.
Technically, yes. In his mind, he didn't want to take even a single unauthorized whiff of benefit that belonged to the collective citizens.
That is so next level. I mean, we are talking about microscopic molecules in the air.
We are. But to him, those molecules were public property. They weren't his to enjoy.
There's another one in the sources about Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph, that's very similar to this.
Yes. His wife wanted to weigh some perfume for the treasury, just volunteering her time to help out with the administration. But Umar flat out refused to let her do it.
Why? She's the first lady, essentially. She's just helping.
He said he feared that after she weighed the perfume, she would instinctively wipe the dust from her fingers onto her neck.
The dust.
Just the invisible residue, the tiny film of oil left on your fingertips when you handle something fragrant. He said if she wiped that micro residue on her neck, she would have taken an unearned benefit from the Muslim's property.
Imagine a politician today worrying about the dust of public funds.
It's almost unimaginable. We live in an era of padded expense accounts, massive kickbacks, and insider trading, and these leaders were actively stressed about perfume dust.
It's like they were building a precision watch, and they knew even a single speck of dust would ruin the entire mechanism.
That is a perfect metaphor. The soul was a precision instrument to them.
Okay, moving down the body, the tongue.
The tongue. Widely regarded as the hardest one to control. The sources say Abu Bakr, the first caliph, was once seen physically holding his own tongue with his hand.
Physically holding it.
Yes, holding his tongue and weeping. He said, "This is what has brought me to the watering holes of destruction."
And this is Abu Bakr, the closest companion of the Prophet, the man universally considered the best of the believers after the prophets.
Right. If Abu Bakr was terrified of the damage his tongue could do, what does that say about the rest of us? There is a profound quote in the texts. I searched for wara and found it scarcest in the tongue. It is just so easy to slip. A sarcastic joke, a snide comment, a complaint. It happens in a fraction of a split second.
And finally, the stomach.
The stomach is the engine room. The core concept here is that the physical body is fueled by what it consumes. If you put in bad fuel haram food or food bought with stolen money, the output of your body will be corrupted.
Like putting diesel fuel into his unleaded gas engine. It's going to knock and eventually fail.
Exactly. The source text explicitly says, everybody nourished by unlawful things, the fire is more fitting for it.
That's a terrifying thought. The idea that the burger I eat today actually affects my spiritual trajectory tomorrow.
It connects directly back to the idea of answered prayers. If the fuel in your engine is bad, your connection to the divine becomes static-filled.
This actually brings us perfectly to the case study section. We've touched on a few of these figures already, but we need to dive deeper into these super users of scrupulousness. Because when you hear these historical stories, they act as a mirror. They show us what's actually possible for a human being.
Let's start right at the top. The Prophet Muhammad himself.
The story of the date on the bed.
Right. So the Prophet Muhammad comes home one day and finds a date lying on his bed. Now remember the context. He lived very, very simply. He was often hungry.
So a piece of fruit is a significant find.
It is. He picks it up, ready to eat it, but then
Yeah.
he drops it.
Why? It's just a date. And it's in his own private house.
Because there was a microscopic possibility that it was from the dates of Sadaqah, from charity. Now, in Islamic law, the Prophet and his immediate family were strictly forbidden from consuming any charity. Charity was exclusively for the poor. As a way to purify the donor's wealth, it wasn't a perk for the leadership.
So he held himself to a standard where he literally couldn't take handouts.
Exactly. Now think about the odds here. It was sitting on his own bed. It was almost certainly his own food.
Like a 99% probability it's his.
Right. And legally speaking, he could have made a very strong, ironclad case. He could have said, the legal default is that things found inside my house belong to me. That's a standard legal maxim.
And that would be level 1 Wara. Completely legal.
Exactly. But he was operating at level 4. He stated, if I didn't fear it was charity, I would have eaten it. He didn't use the phrase, I'm sure it's fine, as an excuse. The mere remote possibility was enough to stop his hand.
Then we have Abu Bakr again. And this story, man, this story is incredibly visceral. The vomit incident.
It is graphic, yes, but it's incredibly powerful. It shows the physical rejection of the haram.
Set the scene for us.
So Abu Bakr had a servant. And in those days, servants would sometimes share their outside earnings or bring food home. One day, the servant brings some food, and Abu Bakr eats it immediately because he had been fasting and was extremely hungry.
Okay.
Usually, Abu Bakr's protocol was to interrogate the source. He'd ask, where did you get this? Where exactly did the money come from? But this one time, pure physical hunger took over. He forgot to ask the questions.
He just let his guard down for a minute.
Right. After he finishes eating, the servant asks him, you didn't ask me where I got this today. Abu Bakr immediately asks where, and the servant says, I did a fortune-telling gig for a tribe back in the pre-Islamic days, and they just paid me for it.
And fortune-telling was considered a total scam.
Total scam, a lie, and technically shirk, which is idolatry.
Yeah.
The servant even admitted to him, I didn't even know how to tell fortunes, I just deceived them and they paid me anyway.
So Abu Bakr just ate a meal bought with old scam money.
Exactly. Now, imagine you are in that exact situation today. Most modern people would say, oh no, well, God forgive me, I honestly didn't know. It's already in my stomach, there's nothing I can do about it now.
Yeah, that's the reasonable response.
Abu Bakr didn't do reasonable. When he heard the source of the money, he turned pale. He immediately shoved his fingers down his throat.
He forced himself.
He forced himself to vomit. He kept trying and trying, gagging until he had emptied every last drop from his stomach. The historical narration says the people around him were actually worried he was going to severely hurt himself.
That is just extreme.
He told them, I would have forced it out even if my soul had to come out with it. He wanted to completely purify his biological system from that corrupt fuel.
It really shows how real this was to them. It wasn't just a philosophical theory. It was like he had accidentally swallowed cyanide.
It was spiritual cyanide to him. He genuinely believed that if that food metabolized and became part of his flesh would be liable for the fire.
Let's look at Umar ibn al-Khattab again. We mentioned the perfume dust earlier, but his daily diet as the leader of the empire is another prime example of this extreme accountability.
Umar ruled an empire that stretched from Persia all the way to Egypt. He controlled massive, unimaginable wealth. But when he ate his meals from the public treasury, he strictly limited himself to plain bread and oil.
Oil. Not even butter.
Ghee clarified butter was considered the luxury item. If his food happened to have ghee in it, he would actually apologize to the people around him. He would say, I am a Bedouin, I don't digest oil well, making a polite excuse for his preference, but he would still force himself to eat the cheaper oil because he flat out refused to take the good stuff that belonged to the public.
And there's another story in the sources about his son's pension. This one really resonates with our modern discussions about political nepotism.
Oh, absolutely. So the state had a tiered pension system for the early immigrants, the Muhajirun. People who migrated to Medina early on for the faith got a high stipend. The standard rate was 4,000 dirhams. But Umar, as the caliph, issued his own son, Abdullah ibn Umar, only 3,500 dirhams.
Why? Abdullah migrated too. He was physically one of them.
People asked him that exact question. They came to him and said, "He's one of the original immigrants. Why did you cut his pay? You're shortchanging your own son."
What was Umar's logic for the pay cut?
Umar said he migrated with his parents. He is not like the one who migrated by his own independent choice.
Wow. So because Abdullah was a kid at the time and just followed his dad, he doesn't get full credit.
Umar was utterly terrified of favoring his own family. He actually penalized his son for his privilege, essentially. He wanted to make absolutely certain that no one could ever accuse him of using the public treasury to enrich his own clan.
That is the literal opposite of nepotism. That is hyper-accountability.
It is.
Now, let's look at a scholar from a slightly later generation, Ibn Sirin, the merchant scholar.
Ibn Sirin is a fascinating historical figure. He was a brilliant interpreter of dreams, a renowned scholar of hadith, but his actual day job was business. He was a market merchant.
And the notes say he ended up in massive debt. Why? He sounds like a smart, capable guy.
He was very smart. But one day, he bought a massive shipment of oil, a huge commercial shipment worth 40,000 dirhams. That was an absolute fortune. And he bought it on credit.
Right. High risk.
When he opened the storage containers to inspect the goods, he found a dead mouse in one of the jars, or some accounts say a dead animal. The narration varies slightly, but the main point is one container was definitely visibly impure.
Okay. Standard loss prevention business logic says, throw away the one bad container and sell the rest to recoup the cost.
That's what any business consultant in the world would tell you to do. But Ibn Sirin paused. He worried. He started thinking, what if the oil was all pressed in a single massive press and then separated into these jars later? What if the mouse moved between them? What if the contamination spread to the whole batch?
The doubt crept in.
The doubt took over. And remember the golden rule. Leave what makes you doubt for what does not make you doubt.
So what did he actually do?
He dumped the entire shipment. All of it.
Okay.
Every last drop.
40,000 dirhams.
Yeah.
Just down the drain.
Gone. And because he destroyed his own inventory, he couldn't sell anything, which meant he couldn't pay back the massive loan he took to buy it.
So he went to debtor's prison.
He did. He willingly accepted imprisonment and public disgrace rather than selling goods that might, just a tiny remote, might be impure to the public.
That is mind-boggling. I mean, from a modern perspective, that is just financial suicide?
To us, yes. But to him, selling doubtful oil was spiritual suicide. He valued his eternal integrity far, far more than his temporary freedom.
We really have to bring this into the modern era because it is so easy to hear these stories and say, oh, those were the ancients. They lived in a simpler time. They were just built different. But we have incredible examples from the 20th century in our sources, too.
We do. Take Sheikh Ibn Baz, the former Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia.
The story about the car. Let's hear it.
Yes. So King Faisal came to visit the Sheikh in Medina. Ibn Baz didn't have a working personal vehicle at the time, so he took a standard public taxi to go meet the king.
The Grand Mufti arriving to a royal meeting in a beat-up taxi.
Exactly. And the king found out about this and was actually very upset. He felt it was disrespectful to the scholar's high status. He thought the state was failing to provide for him. So the king immediately sent him a brand new luxury car as a personal gift.
That's a nice gift. Problem solved.
Most people would say, Alhamdulillah, finally some comfort. But Ibn Baz looked at it and said, return it.
Why? It's a gift from the head of state.
He said, our own car is sufficient. He didn't want the luxury. He feared the psychological attachment to the wealth. But his students stepped in and argued with him. They said, Sheikh, this is from the king. It's a legitimate gift, and you serve the public interest. You need reliable transport to get to the lecture hall, to get to the Grand Mosque.
Right. It's a practical tool for the job.
Exactly. So what did he do? He prayed istikhara.
The specific prayer for guidance.
Yes. He asked God for direct guidance on the matter. And only then did he accept the car, but with a very specific stated intention. He accepted it as a tool for public utility, not for his own personal luxury. He had to completely reframe the ownership in his heart before he could even put the key in the ignition.
And then there's Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, the ink story. This one is so incredibly small in scale, but it just hits so hard.
This is genuinely my favorite modern example of war. Ibn Uthaymeen was a prominent professor at a university, and he would use the university's standard pen and ink for his official work, grading papers, writing out his lectures, administrative stuff.
Just standard run-of-the-mill office supplies.
Exactly. But every single day before he left his office to go home,
What did you do?
he would carefully unscrew his pen and empty the remaining ink back into the university's main inkwell.
You've got to be kidding. The tiny amount of ink inside the reservoir.
The ink inside the pen. He reasoned that the ink legally belonged to the university. If he walked home with it in his pocket, he was carrying public property off campus, even though we were talking about literally fractions of a penny's worth of ink.
And if he went home and wrote a personal grocery list or a letter with that ink,
Then in his eyes, he would be a thief. He would be stealing from the state.
that brings us right back to the atomic level. The dust from the perfume, the microscopic weights of the soul.
It does. It shows that for these men, God was watching their lives in high definition, like 4K resolution. There were absolutely no blind spots where they felt they could just slack off.
It's incredible. And it naturally segues into another aspect of Wara that the sources touched on, which is social interaction, specifically the concept of advice, or nasiya.
Yes, the source material actually opened with some really beautiful classical poetry about this.
I was wondering how that fit into the larger theme. Advice. How is giving advice related to Wara?
Well, part of having war is knowing your strict boundaries with other people. It's knowing when your advice is genuine care and when it's actually just satisfying your own ego's need to correct someone else.
The classic, I told you so, disguised as religious piety.
Exactly. The poetry had this brilliant line, "The plague of advice is that it becomes an argument."
Man, that hits close to home.
And there was another line, "Not everyone who shows affection is a true advisor." True scrupulousness involves being humble enough to actually take advice when you need it, but wise enough to filter it when it's just someone projecting their own issues onto you.
And there was a big point made about privacy.
Yes. This is crucial to the ethics of it. Advice given in public is just shaming. If you really have war, if you genuinely care about the other person's soul and their dignity, you pull them aside and advise them in total private. If you do it publicly on a stage or online in a comment section, you're really just performing your own righteousness for the audience.
That's a very powerful distinction. It goes right back to the scrupulousness of the tongue we talked about earlier.
It absolutely does.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've done the definitions, we mapped out the 4 levels, we went through the physical senses, and we highlighted some wild historical stories. But the big question really remains, why?
The motivation.
Yeah, why live like this? Why make your life so incredibly difficult and restricted? What is the actual payoff for all this effort?
It's the ultimate so what question, and the classical sources are very, very clear on the tangible benefits of living this way.
Let's hear them. What are they?
The first major benefit is lightness of account on Judgment Day.
Lightness.
Think about it like this. Imagine you are traveling through a massive international airport. You have 20 heavy, oversized suitcases. You're sweating, you're stressed, you have to declare a bunch of weird items at customs, security is pulling everything out, and it takes forever.
Absolute nightmare scenario.
Now, imagine traveling through that same airport with just a small carry-on bag. You have your boarding pass, your ID, and a toothbrush. You just breeze right through the checkpoints.
I really like that image. Traveling light through the afterlife.
Wara is traveling light. You don't have all this heavy baggage of questionable business earnings and shady gray area beads to explain to God. You don't have to explain the public musk you smelled or the university ink you took. Your ledger is clear.
That makes a lot of sense. What's the second benefit?
Answered prayers. We touched on this briefly with the stomach. The prophet explicitly mentioned a man who travels a long distance and he is dusty and disheveled, which are usually the exact conditions where a prayer is guaranteed to be answered. He's raising his hands to the sky saying, "O Lord, O Lord."
The desperate, sincere prayer.
Very sincere. But his food is haram, his drink is haram, and the clothes on his back were bought with haram money. The prophet rhetorically asks, how can he be answered?
So practicing Wara clears the signal.
It clears all the static on the line. It restores the direct connection to the divine.
And the third benefit?
Peace of mind. This is the immediate psychological payoff right now in this current life. The prophet said, truth is tranquility and lying is doubt.
Unpack that for us.
When you live constantly in the gray area, you develop this low-level, continuous background anxiety. You know that feeling. Did I do something wrong there? Is this tax deduction actually okay? Will I get caught for this?
Yeah, that constant background hum of guilt, it just drains your battery over time.
Exactly. When you practice true Wara, that hum completely stops. You sleep so much better at night. You know you stayed 50 feet away from the fence, so you know you are safe. You have absolutely nothing to hide.
And interestingly enough, looking at the notes, The sources even allude to physical health as a byproduct.
It's true. If you are highly scrupulous about what you eat, actively avoiding gluttony, avoiding doubtful or corrupted food sources, your physical body is naturally going to be healthier. It's a holistic benefit. The spiritual discipline bleeds into physical well-being.
So let's wrap this up. We have gone really deep today.
We definitely have.
Wara isn't just about rigidly following a list of rules. Listening to all this, it really seems like it's an art form, the fine art of leaving the gray area.
It is a high-performance lifestyle for the spirit. It's built for people who aren't just satisfied with barely passing the test. They want excellence. They want what the tradition calls isan.
And as we sign off today, I want to leave you, the listener, with that final image of the ink. The tiny drop of ink in the pen.
It's a haunting image, but in a really good, inspiring way.
Because we live in a modern world where we constantly cut corners. We take the office supplies without thinking. We fudge the numbers on the expense report just a little bit. We take that lingering second glance. We graze our sheep right up against the king's fence.
We do. We've completely normalized living in the gray.
So ask yourself, what would your life look like? What would our entire society look like if we had that historical level of integrity? If we genuinely cared about the dust of our actions?
It would be a total revolution of human character.
It's definitely something to mull over the next time you're about to do something that just might be wrong. Find your protective fence.
And stay well back from it.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Yep.
Catch you next time.